Hello bookworms, welcome back to my channel and to another review. Today I will talk about The Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee, which tells the story of an opera singer from the 1800s, from her very humble beginnings in America to her journey to Europe with a traveling circus, to being a can-can dancer, to being a courtesan, to working both for the Empress and against her, to her being discovered as a talented singer with a rare voice. And all along she tries to find herself and make a life which is her own. So I've been reading a lot of fun thrillers lately, which is nothing bad, but this is the first really adult book that I've read for a while, and I really enjoyed it. It took me a long time to read it, and it's definitely not a light, fluffy read, but if you're in the mindset of an interesting historical life story full of loves and losses and adventures and schemes, lots of schemes, then this is a really great book, and I already have at least 5 people in my life that I really want to recommend this book to. By the way, in case that wasn't clear, this is complete fiction. It's not biographical. The protagonist was not a real person, although she is loosely based on a different opera singer, or according to the author, the fantasy version of her life. But characters like Composer Verdi and Empress Eugenie were indeed real people. However, our opera singer Liliette, this is probably not the way you actually pronounce her name. I did try to look all over the internet for real pronunciation of that name. However, what I did find was mostly real pronunciation of the liquor with the same name, but I'm not sure you pronounce the liquor the same way you pronounce the actual human name. So if you have any info, if you're maybe French, then tell me how you actually pronounce this name. However, our opera singer was complete fiction. But now, after general recommendations, let's get into more details, starting with positives. As I said, this was an interesting, well-rounded life story with many different parts and aspects to it. It was deep enough to feel more comprehensive, but wasn't too heavy. And by the way, it was written in 2016. Also, the synopsis I gave for the book is just the dry details on the surface. This book is about an opera singer whose life is kind of like an opera themselves. And I thought it was really cool, but more on that in a moment. I also like combining true history in fiction. I always liked those, and it was very clear that the author did a lot of research about Europe at the times. You can really feel the world of the book come alive, whether it's the mindset of the people, the fashion, the different classes, etc. Although I do have to nitpick and say, especially because the author did so much research, many times you would have a woman who takes off her dress to change to a new one, and it would describe that she will be naked. Dude, are you aware of the layers on layers of clothing women wore back then? Even if a lady wanted to change from a simple tea gown to a fancy ball gown, she wouldn't get naked. She would at least have her chemise and corset underneath, not to mention socks. It's a silly little detail, but it bugged me. Speaking of things that bugged me, let's talk negatives. I notice I have some little thing that bothered me, and their number may be higher than the number of positives, but it's not about the quantity, but the quality. In terms of plotline, for the first half of the book, we basically get a heroine who travels around, finds herself in a new environment where she tries to find herself, and then she decides to run away without giving any notice. Sometimes it would make sense, but sometimes it wouldn't. And her constant running away, sometimes in my opinion needlessly, became exhausting after a while. Speaking of, probably the thing that bothered me the most in the book was that the logic behind many decisions in the book was beyond me. At times I understood why Liliette had to run away or why she had to do so in secret, but for the most part, I was really baffled to why people did what they did. For example, there's a love story and it seems like the lovers are finally together, and then one of them decides that the only way for one of them to be happy is for the other to leave them? many times I just didn't understand their logic. At times, it had to do with politics, and I admit that I don't understand much about the different levels of royalty and why would one hate the other, but first, maybe it should have been made more clear. And second, sometimes it had nothing to do with politics and just had to do with common sense, or lack of it. Other than that, other little things that bothered me were mostly the love affair that wasn't really engaging and wasn't really fleshed out. I just didn't get why these two people wanted to be with each other, but maybe the worst one was that the author made a very strange decision not to put any quotation marks in the book. You heard me right. When things are described, when we hear people's thoughts, or when people are actually talking, it's all written in the same way. This was confusing and I really don't know why he did that. But before I move on to the conclusion, I do want to touch on a very interesting and prevalent theme in the book, which is autonomy. As you can imagine, our protagonist is a woman in the 1800s, which means she doesn't have much autonomy and control over her own life. This is clear in many aspects in the novel. First, as she moves from one place to another, it really feels like she's passively moved and not doing the decisions herself, kind of like being on a boat and just letting the waves take you to wherever they want to. She, her fate, her future is always in the hands of others. And secondly, she is literally owned at some point by a man who just decides everything for her. She has zero autonomy. Basically, this is a story of a woman who started her life thinking she knows what she wants and start taking steps to get there, only to wake up one day and realize that she is a side character in another person's story. And this story is in itself very much resembling an opera. It's adventurous, larger than life, deals with fate and curses, has great love affairs and evil villains. She realizes that she is, in a way, a character like the one she plays, the one she pretends to be. And within the limits of her status, times, gender, and history, she tries to find her own story, to be the master of her own life, the protagonist in her own story. And it's done in such an interesting way in this novel, but also interwoven so seamlessly into the plot that it doesn't hit you in the head with it. And therefore we reach the conclusion. I highly recommend this book if you are at all interested in biographical stories, opera in the theater, life in the 1800s, stories of women, historical novels, etc. However, I will state the obvious and warn you that there are a few themes here that some people might be a bit sensitive for, mostly the treatment of women at the times. The casual abuse of women and treating them like property is also presented very casually in the book. I mentioned Liliette working as a courtesan. She's basically an upper-class prostitute, and sex that is basically rape is regarded as no big deal, you know, just give men what they want. And of course, the prolonged abuse by a man who is in control of every little thing in the woman's life. I know that these can be a bit too much for some, so beware. But other than that, I really enjoyed this book, which towards the end I realized is part Moulin Rouge and part The Little Mermaid, but I suppose that's not a bad thing, I think. Anyway guys, that was my review on The Queen of the Night by Alexander Chee. Thank you very much for watching my video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to my channel so that you won't miss any other bookish video I upload. Also, write me down below a comment saying what is your favorite historical novel, whether it's completely based on history or combines real events with fake characters. Again guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.